My mother-in-law insisted on living together as a condition for my marriage. I accepted that, married my husband Donald, and began living with my in-laws. However, what awaited me was my mother-in-law's constant sarcastic remarks and harassment. One day I found out I was pregnant and decided to give birth at my parents' home. On the day I returned home, I went to the entrance of my mother-in-law's house and noticed my shoes were missing. It was then that my mother-in-law said something shocking to me. During my maternity leave, my mother-in-law, who had harassed me, ended up receiving shocking words from her beloved son in return. I'm pregnant with my second child now, but should I write about what happened during my first pregnancy? When I decided to marry my husband of 3 years and went to introduce myself before marriage, my mother-in-law gave us a condition. That condition was for us all to cohabitate once we got married. My mother-in-law deeply loves my husband and feels she cannot live apart from him. He is an only child and has never experienced living alone. When he mentioned applying to a university out of state, he faced immediate resistance from his parents. In the end, he chose to attend a local university that he could commute to from home. That's how unwilling my mother-in-law was to let go of my husband. Since I'm also an only child and grew up being doted on by my parents, I can somewhat understand my mother-in-law's feelings. Living together was a condition. If it were up to me, I would have declined that kind of servitude contract. Wow, well, with a mother-in-law like that, marriage is bound to be challenging, right? Considering how much she loves her son, I'm surprised she agreed to our marriage. But she mentioned that people judge when an older son like him isn't married yet. It seems like she approved the marriage because she cares more about what others think. She often talked about the importance of having an heir, though. After getting married, we started living with my in-laws. Every day was bewildering because our lifestyles and habits were so different. On top of that, my mother-in-law would always find something to criticize me about. I was told my cooking tasted bland, so I made it richer, but now she's saying it's too strong. I'm in a dilemma. My cooking never seemed to please her, so she always found something to criticize. But my husband and father-in-law always enjoyed it and would say, "Delicious, delicious," so I didn't worry too much. When my husband says it's delicious, my mother-in-law would say with a hint of envy, "Men generally prefer stronger flavors, you know." I was pressured every day to quickly have a child, preferably a boy. Of course, I was nitpicked behind my husband's back. Besides that, I faced various forms of harassment. However, since I reported everything to my husband and complained regularly, he understood the mistreatment I received from my mother-in-law. I had planned to move out eventually, so we were saving together for that time. It was a promise made at the time of marriage, so we decided to live with my parents for 3 years and steadily prepared for the future. I managed to brush off my mother-in-law's sarcastic attacks somehow. Sometimes venting to my husband to relieve stress, and lived day by day. About a year after marriage, I discovered I was pregnant. When I told my husband, he was very happy. Overjoyed, he wanted to buy baby items right away, but I told him it was still too early. Still, I was happy that my husband was pleased. When we told my in-laws, my father-in-law was happy, but my mother-in-law seemed displeased. "I'm happy that a grandchild is being born, but I won't be taking care of it. Lately my back and legs hurt, so I want you to take care of it. So don't count on me for that." It was supposed to be a moment of pure joy, but then my mother-in-law said something that instantly dampened the mood. When I gathered myself and reported the news to my parents, they were overjoyed. I told them over the phone, and my parents' joyful voices overwhelmed me. My parents suggested that, of course, I would give birth back at their home. I asked my parents to take care of me, thinking it would be better that way, given my mother-in-law's attitude earlier. Although it was after the fact, when I told my husband that I would be going back to my parents' house to give birth, he agreed that it was a good idea. When I told my parents-in-law about the plan, my father-in-law agreed, but my mother-in-law was furious. "It's my grandchild, so why are you raising it at your parents' house? Isn't that strange? It's absolutely not right." That's what she said. The grandchild is a nuisance to her, but she wants us to stay home. What am I supposed to do? But this time, I didn't intend to back down, so I insisted on returning to my parents' house to give birth. For my mother-in-law, a rebellious daughter-in-law isn't cute, so she got even angrier. My husband sided with me, so he supported me, and managed to calm my parents-in-law down. But one remark from my father-in-law managed to quell my mother-in-law's anger. It was a perfect example of someone completely changing their attitude in an instant. As expected, my father-in-law is skilled at handling my mother-in-law. I don't know if he said it to calm her down, or if it was his true feelings, but he said, "It's been a while since we've had actual family time." I've only lived with them for about a year, but I'm always reminded that I'm not actual family. My husband heard it too, and his face was twitching. But those words instantly made my mother-in-law happy. She even agreed to me giving birth at my parents' house. You need to go back to your parents' house and relax sometimes." She was calm and smiling brightly, which was hard to believe after her anger earlier. I was worried about my mother-in-law on many levels. While disappointed by my father-in-law's comment, I got permission to give birth at my parents' house. After that, I continued my days without much change. Maybe my mother-in-law's harassment decreased a bit. In my last month of pregnancy, I started packing to go to my parents' house for the birth. My mother-in-law watched me with a smile. Feeling a bit creeped out, I picked up my luggage and called out to my mother-in-law before heading to my parents' house, but my shoes that I left by the door were missing. Thinking I might have put them away, I opened the shoe cabinet, but they weren't there. None of my shoes were there. While I stood in the entrance, unable to understand the situation, my mother-in-law spoke to me. "Michelle, your shoes were dirty, so I threw them all away. We need to keep the entrance clean or it'll bring bad luck." What? What is she talking about? It took me a moment to understand my mother-in-law's words. No, I couldn't possibly understand. "Mom, you didn't need to throw them all away just because they were dirty. Why did you throw them away?" "Because your shoes are dirty and smelly. There's no point in keeping garbage, so I had to throw them out." Dirty? Smelly? Even the sneakers my husband bought me because they looked comfortable when we went shopping for baby supplies were thrown away. I just started wearing them today. What do you mean by dirty? There were even shoes that I just started wearing today, right? I haven't even worn them once. "Did I see such shoes? I don't know, maybe you're mistaken?" My mother-in-law denied it after saying she threw them away. "No need to thank me. Come on, hurry up or you'll miss your train." Without any sign of remorse, I was pushed out of the entrance barefoot by my mother-in-law. Then I heard the sound of the entrance being locked. I didn't have the house key, so I couldn't get back in. I rang the doorbell several times, knocked on the door, and shouted to be let in, but there was no response. I thought of at least getting my slippers, but they were put away. The back door was also securely locked. I gave up and decided to go back to my parents' house barefoot. I thought about buying shoes somewhere, but there were no shoe stores on the way to the station. So there I was, a barefoot pregnant woman dragging a suitcase down the street. Almost everyone I passed turned to look at me. I was embarrassed, but looking down made it worse, so I held my head high and walked confidently, as if to say this is perfectly normal. When I got near the station, my phone rang. It was my father. I wondered why he was calling at this time and answered the phone.
"I was able to get off work in the afternoon, so I'll come pick you up now. Are you already on your way here?"
Hearing my father's voice, something inside me snapped, and tears started to fall from my eyes. I'm near the station now. I managed to choke out a response to my father. Hearing my voice, he seemed to sense something was wrong.
"What's wrong? Did something happen? Where are you? I'll come get you right away."
He fired off questions rapidly. I told him to pick me up at the station and sat on a bench. I covered my feet with my skirt to hide them. I was glad I was wearing a long skirt. About 30 minutes after the call, a familiar car stopped in front of me. My father had come to pick me up, so I quickly got into the passenger seat. My father must have noticed my red eyes and realized something had happened, but he pretended not to know and made small talk in the car. When I arrived at my parents' house and entered the entrance, my father told me to wait here. My father went inside and disappeared into the back, then came back with a basin filled with hot water. He brought a chair, sat me down, and washed my feet. I said it's okay, I can do it myself, but...
"This isn't for you, it's for the baby in your belly. If you bend over, the baby will be crushed and feel uncomfortable. That's why I'm doing this."
He said that and continued washing my feet quietly. I felt overwhelmed with guilt. After washing my feet, I went inside the house and relaxed. My father made me a cup of decaffeinated coffee and brought a lap blanket to keep me warm. We spent a leisurely and pleasant time, talking about whether we've decided on a name for the baby and looking at baby goods he had bought. My father is so kind. In the evening, my mother came home from work.
"Michelle, you're here? Oh, welcome back. Wow, your belly has gotten so big. So why did you come back all of a sudden? What happened? Tell me everything."
My father must have contacted her. My mother is the type of person who will investigate until she's satisfied. I finally understood why my father hadn't asked me anything. With my mother's eyes glistening and my father's ears perked up, pretending not to be interested, I told him everything about the treatment I had received from my mother-in-law. Even the fact that she had thrown away the shoes my husband had just bought me. After I finished talking, my parents were astonished by my mother-in-law's behavior. At first, they were probably angry, but it seemed to have passed. and the conclusion they came to was that I should live here permanently and invite my husband to join me. That was it. The doorbell rang. I wondered who it could be at this hour, and my husband came into the room.
Michelle, are you okay? Did you hurt your foot? What happened? What's going on?
He grabbed my foot with both hands and looked at it carefully. It seems that my father had also contacted my husband. When I glared at my father, he quickly hid his face with a newspaper. Seeing this, my mother chuckled. I assured my husband that I was fine and explained everything I had just told my parents. He looked expressionless, but I could feel a quiet anger. I jokingly reported that my parents suggested we should live here. I expected him to laugh and brush it off, but he started to think seriously. Well, and joking aside, when I started to say that, my husband turned towards me.
Yeah, let's do that. Dad, Mom, I appreciate everything you've done. Are you sure about this? Is it really okay? We're thrilled, though.
My mother and father looked happy at the unexpected answer. Are you sure you want to do this? Won't your mother be upset?
It doesn't concern Mom. I want to be with Michelle and our child who will be born soon, and I've been thinking about this for a while.
My husband said this and started talking to my parents about something. I was excluded, so I decided to take a bath. I'm curious about what they're talking about. Wow, my husband moves quickly. For a husband, making such a quick decision means he must have had a lot on his mind until now. After getting out of the bath, I enjoyed the dinner my mother had made leisurely, but my husband had to return home today to bring luggage from his parents' house. The next day, my husband arrived home with a large amount of luggage. I helped him unpack, thinking he's really set on living at my parents' place.
I brought all the necessary belongings so we don't have to return to that house anymore. And yes,
he said, handing me a paper bag. When I looked inside, there were shoes that my husband had bought for me.
Those shoes were brand new, so it seems my mother kept them to wear herself. I found them when I was searching for something, so I brought them with me.
I thanked my husband for retrieving the shoes, even if it was by chance. It was a gift from my husband, so I couldn't give up on them. After tidying up some of the luggage, my husband started making a phone call. I could hear voices leaking from my husband's smartphone. The other person sounded like my mother-in-law. Oh, what's wrong? Are you being taken advantage of again by Michelle? What does she think of my precious son? Next time I need to give her a little lecture. I thought about saying loudly, "Can you hear me, Mom?" But I held back because my husband was on the phone.
Hey, Mom. Michelle and I won't be coming home anymore.
Huh? What? Wait, is this some kind of joke? Oh no, you can't fool me. Enough joking. What would you like for dinner tonight? Since Michelle isn't here, we can have a quiet family meal. How about sushi? It's been a while. I could hear the conversation clearly, and it stirred up mixed feelings inside me.
So we won't be coming back home anymore. I'm cutting ties with you guys. Can't you just let it go?
I couldn't help but exclaim in surprise as I listened from the side. Cutting ties. This is the first time I've heard about it. You mentioned you had something on your mind, but was it this? Hey, what are you talking about? Even if you say you'll cut ties, you can't just sever the bond between parent and child. Her voice sounds urgent.
Hey, do you even realize what you've done? I can't believe that someone who hurts my loved ones is part of my family.
Oh no, my heart flutters at my husband's words. My emotions are in turmoil between feeling confused and fluttering with excitement. Afterwards, my husband and mother-in-law continued to argue about something, but I was exhausted from fluctuating emotions. Eventually, my mother-in-law got angry again, and the situation got out of hand, so my husband hung up the phone. My husband looked worried as he saw me exhausted beside him. Even though I said I was fine, I ended up getting a fever afterwards. It's probably a stress-induced fever, formerly known as stress-induced hyperthermia. My emotions were shaken up and took quite a hit. Am I okay? Since I'm pregnant, I should avoid stress. Thank you for worrying about me. I was fine the next day after recovering. After my husband called his mother, we received a message from my father-in-law, and a family meeting was scheduled at their place for another day. Because my due date was approaching, I couldn't attend, so only my husband went. And then my husband returned, having cut ties with my father-in-law.
We're not going back to that house anymore.
Our belongings were all brought to my parents' house, so there was no need to return, but I checked with my husband if that was really okay, and he was firm in his decision. Also, it seems he had been thinking about this for quite some time and was waiting for the right timing. Actually, my father-in-law was cheating. My father-in-law is currently in a relationship and wishes to marry the other person. It seems my father-in-law took an unapologetic stance and confessed to his affair during the family meeting. My husband was aware that my father-in-law was cheating, and my mother-in-law already knew. Therefore, when my husband said he would no longer have anything to do with his parents, cut off all contact with his family, and asked them to pretend he was never born, it seems my father-in-law became very angry. When my husband calmly explained why he had come to such a decision, my father-in-law then started to get angry at my mother-in-law. He began blaming her for poor upbringing and behavior, launching a one-sided attack on my mother-in-law. Despite my husband trying to calm the situation, my mother-in-law also expressed her dissatisfaction with my father-in-law, and their argument escalated into a fight. With things escalating beyond discussion into a fight between the two of them, my husband left and came home. And then another surprising story came from my husband's mouth. He said he plans to become adopted by my father and legally change his surname to my maiden name. Apparently, this was what he had discussed with my parents recently. After receiving the news from my husband, my mother-in-law called me. She pleaded with me to somehow persuade my husband. "Michelle, I'm sorry for everything that's happened so far. Please don't take my son away from me. Don't monopolize him, please. Could you persuade him to come back home properly? Could you tell him I'm not angry at all? Everything's fine?" Even though you're apologizing, you're really not. It feels like you're saying I'm the one at fault. That's why I think you're being cut off by your beloved son. I just heard from my husband too, and I'm wondering why this is happening. Oh, I see. Your heart is dirty, isn't it, Mom? That's why you've been cut off by your beloved son, isn't it? Dirty things should be thrown away, right, Mom? Something stinks even over the phone, so I'll leave it here. It seemed like she was saying something, but I hung up the phone. Next to me, my husband is stifling with his laughter.
Hey, Michelle, that's mean.
My husband couldn't help but burst out laughing. But I wanted to retaliate a little, you know. It was about as powerful as a cat punch, though.
It was a good effort for you, Michelle.
I tried my best to insult my mother-in-law, but since I'm not used to saying such things, I realized it was weak. But I consoled myself by thinking that what my beloved husband did was a big blow to her, so maybe this much is just right.
I mean, I told her not to contact the family either, but she broke that rule immediately. That's why it's no good. Michelle, you can block my parents' phone calls. There's no need to deal with them anymore. If anything happens, I'll be a wall for you, so don't worry about it.
My husband's kind words made me feel ticklish and embarrassed, so I moved a bit and clung to his back to hide my face. He teased me a bit for it, but didn't seem to mind. I suddenly felt a gaze and looked towards the door where my father stood. Dad. Noticing my father's presence, I froze as well.
Well, I wanted to talk to your husband. It seems like my timing was bad. Sorry.
Saying that, my father closed the door. After that, I was so embarrassed, I was in agony with my husband. If I could erase it, I would want to erase that memory, yes. I was appalled by my mother-in-law's condescending phone call. I'm betting that she won't reflect on what happened this time. I hope she realizes that even a cat punch can hurt a bit. Dad's timing. After that, my husband was adopted by my father and became his son-in-law. We finished the procedures for the name change, and I also successfully gave birth. Our healthy baby boy was vigorously kicking his legs and arms. My husband and parents always had soft smiles when they looked at our son. Our son has grown quickly and now loves crawling around and poking at people. I talked with my husband about how we can't stay at my parents' house forever. We told them that we plan to rent a place nearby and live as a family of 3. They asked if we could continue living together here, and we agreed humbly. I immediately agreed with my husband to an unexpected offer from my parents. My parents seemed to have various strategies on how to keep us in this house with them, but in the end, they simply asked us directly while laughing about it. So now we're going to start living together at my parents' house. While living at my parents' house, I feel relaxed and unrestricted, but I worried that my husband might find it stressful, having to be mindful of various things. Yet compared to when we lived at my in-laws, we talk more and laugh together often. Living at my parents' house made me feel like my husband could be himself more. I often recall how tired my husband looked when we lived with my in-laws. If we had continued living with my in-laws, perhaps our family might have been crushed. Thinking about this, I can only feel gratitude towards my husband's actions and decisions. Now I'm living happily with my husband's son and parents. After that, my in-laws ended up divorcing and my father-in-law moved out to marry his affair partner. My mother-in-law was forcefully kicked out of the house after they sold the home they were living in. With nowhere else to go, my mother-in-law returned to her parents' house, where she lived as she pleased. This angered her sister, who also lived there, enough to kick her out. I suspect my mother-in-law did something to provoke her, given her usual behavior. Afterwards, she apparently moved around among relatives' houses, but got kicked out everywhere and now works and lives elsewhere in another state. My father-in-law remarried and seemed happy, but I heard he's being pressured for money by his new spouse's children, despite them being grown and having families of their own. He complains to neighbors about being asked for money every now and then. It seems he doesn't hold back because he wants to make a good impression on his new spouse, but if the situation continues, he'll likely be penniless in no time. A day when my father-in-law divorces again might be near. That's all I can report for now. Thank you for your attention. Best regards, Michelle. The whole family seems so close-knit. I envy that. Before losing everything, shouldn't the father-in-law have escaped? Cutting ties was the right call. Your husband's decisiveness and initiative were great. I'll pray that your happiness continues, Michelle. The mother-in-law lived with her son and daughter-in-law, occasionally harassing the latter, but still enjoyed happy days with her beloved son. Disrespecting her beloved son's wife resulted in her own disrespect. Because the father-in-law neglected his own family, he was disrespected by his remarried partner's family. Michelle's husband chose the right person to cherish and build a happy family with. What goes around, comes around, both good and bad. Let's take a moment to reflect on our actions once again.